Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are so programmed when something doesn't seem right in our bodies, we go right to the doctor, which is fine, but sometimes it may not be the best remedy to make you feel better, especially if you're somebody that, and I have a friend who just got diagnosed with a number of different challenges, and she told me, I don't take medicine. I don't want to take anything like traditional pharmaceuticals, but she's now forced to. Or is she? What about if you looked at traditional medicine? He's looked at it for years and knows it works, helps a lot of people with that. He is Douglas Becker, and he's back on the program with us. Douglas, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so like my friend or anybody, if they were looking at indigenous medicine, traditional route in terms of medicine, how about we take a look at the steps? What step one would be in the process to adopt that type of culture in terms of healing?
Sure. Well, the first step would really be whether a person is really all in or not, like whether they're really into it or not. Because a lot of the mindset in the West is, especially when people start to get out of Western medicine paradigm, they jump around from one thing to another thing. And so, they should establish, I feel they should establish whether if that's what they really want. We live in a modern era. Some people want to just take a pill and for instance, lower their blood pressure and deal with any side effects as they might come. Some pharmaceutical medicines do help a little bit with certain things with not so much side effects. People don't really know how to determine, what side effects are dangerous and what aren't, and what leads to what. And so if they've really decided that, this is, they want to try a more natural traditional approach, then there's certain parameters that you'd look at, there's certain baselines to make sure your body has the strength to show up in the way that these systems were designed to do. Knowing like to what degree your body has strength too is also important. If you've been, for instance, if you've been fasting for 2 weeks at a time every month, your body's probably a little bit emaciated, a little bit weak, and it's going to take some more time and more effort. So each person is individual, and you really have to look at the whole picture. Do they have strength in their body? Do they have a support system at home? Is it going to be easy, or are they going to experience a whole bunch of stress being caused because they want to do traditional medicine? All these things are super important to consider, and so if you can organize your life in a way where you won't have a lot of pushback and stress, where your health situation is not super critical, you're not super weak, then you can look at certain things. If any of those things are present, you have to consider those things. Like if you're already on medication, for instance, what if you're already on pharmaceutical medication? There's a whole regimen that should be followed, usually, where you slowly get off the pharmaceutical. You measure whatever it's, if it's a blood pressure medication, you're measuring your blood pressure twice a day. If it's a blood sugar medication, you're measuring your blood sugar every day. And you want to be able to show a document to your physician, if you're working with one, that says, look, now my blood sugar is normally this, and I'm taking this medication. Is it cool if I reduce it? And they can be on board. That's the most responsible way to do it. Not everyone's like, a lot of people are like, I've had enough of this crap, and they throw it out the window and they just go for it. But and it's a heroic thing to do. It's not always the most intelligent, because the body's been acclimated by a lot of these medications. So that's the one thing I would say to really take consideration of, as well as transitioning if you're already on medicine. If you're not, and you're just wanting to support your health and all that, then you really want to look at the strength of your digestion, how you eat, what you eat, The if you have like a consistent pattern that's healthy, there's a diet, there's a lifestyle regimen that's talked about in most traditions where you wake up, you brush your teeth, you go to the bathroom, you put some oil on your skin to make sure your skin isn't getting dry. You take a shower, and then you get dressed in clean clothes, do some light exercise, maybe some simple meditation and breathing, and prepare for the day to start, and have some warm water. Warm water in the beginning of the day, that's considered to be the first medicine in
Wow.
traditional medicine. It warms up the stomach, it helps the digestion, and this isn't like an immediate, strong like pharmaceutical medication. It's something that over weeks, over months, consistent warm water in the morning really helps improve the strength of your digestion and the longevity of that strength in your digestion. So,
Huh.
once you're looking at your situation, there's um, different signals your body gives you in terms of how it needs to be balanced. If you're having a hard time sleeping and you're having looser stools and you tend to have a hotter body temperature and you tend to have a hard time turning off, you start to cut out for a while liquid oils like essential fatty acids, nuts and seeds that have those liquid oils in them. If you're having a really hard time getting moving in the morning, and then you should really look at starting to introduce those kind of oils more, especially in the earlier part of the day, and also start to reduce or cut out for a while fats that are solid at room temperature, like butter, ghee, coconut oil. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that simple shift will start to support your body to move in the direction that it wants to go.
Interestingly,
So instead of just like adding herbs or things like this, we first look at like, okay, well, what direction does the body want to go to? And do we really want to push it against that direction, or do we want to encourage the direction that the body wants to go into to be balanced for what we're wanting to have in our life? So if we want energy in the day and we want to go to sleep at night, yeah, we can take herbs and stuff to force us to sleep. We can take herbs and things to force us to have energy. But if our body is naturally like not turning on in the beginning of the day, then we'll really want to support that to happen first. If we support that to happen first, then we just need to add a tiny bit of herbs and we'll have a lot of energy. And the same if we're trying to go to sleep, instead of like pushing ourselves to go to sleep with things, we can just take a tiny bit of something, and maybe we won't even need that. So the foundation of what our body uses to achieve what it wants to achieve for our health comes from our food and from our breathing, and from the way we feel. If we're not metabolizing our life experience completely, if we're kind of like tuning out to some of the experiences and of the situations we have, and we're not really integrating them and feeling them, our bodies are going to suffer. Our physical bodies are going to suffer, as well as our mental and emotional state. So we need to really metabolize everything, not just food, but also our life experience. And then another thing we can look at too is how we're breathing. If we're breathing really, really slow, and even like our body stops breathing, that's an indication that we're not metabolizing our carbohydrates. And we should really look closely at that. Yeah. Because the response for breathing, the action of breathing is based on the need for the body to get rid of acid, to get rid of carbon dioxide. Okay, that carbon dioxide comes from the carbohydrates that we eat mostly. And if they're not being metabolized, what happens is the pH of our blood is changing. It's getting to be too alkaline, meaning that initially the blood will become more oxygenated, but if it gets past a certain point of alkalinity, it won't be able to let go of that oxygen. So the tissues will starve for oxygen. So if we're breathing really slow, it's an indication that the body's trying to hold on to that acid. It's trying to hold on to as much acid to regulate the blood pH. So, we should have a normal breath rate that's not stopping. We shouldn't be like finding ourselves stopping. We shouldn't be able to easily hold our breath for 2 minutes. That's like an indication that the body is not really producing that acid properly from metabolizing the carbohydrates. So there's indications like that. We should be peeing. We shouldn't be like peeing like once a day, hardly at all. We shouldn't be pooping every few days. We should have regular bowel movements. We should be sweating as well. All these are natural outcomes of health. In traditional Tibetan medicine, we look at it kind of like mind mapping with like a tree. There's one part of the tree that's one trunk of the tree is health, one trunk of the tree is disease. And in addition to having the proper emotional energies and tissues, there's also waste products. So those waste products are really important as an indication of health. And then at the top of the tree, we have good health and long life as two flowers, and we have purpose. Let's see, purpose, wealth, and happiness. Yeah, so good health and long life are the two flowers, and purpose, wealth, and happiness are these, what would they call, the three fruits. So this is like the result. If we're not experiencing, wealth doesn't have to be money. It just means abundance. It means abundance of maybe knowledge, abundance of resources, yeah, of all kinds. And then purpose, having a purpose. When you wake up in the morning, you know why you're here and what you're doing and what you're going to do. They call it dharma. Like, what's your dharma for the day? It's a natural part of the result of your health. And happiness. You should be happy. And so if you don't have those things, you can look at like waste products, on a more grosser level. But if you don't have health or dharma, wealth, and happiness, or purpose, wealth, and happiness, then it's an indication that you still have things to do to make yourself more healthy. As far as diet goes, we look at three different primary energies that are pushing habits of a person, and that those are kind of inborn. Like, you have a person that's really kind of fiery, or a person that's really kind of like soft and sweet and generous, and kind of like not really going. It takes them a while to get going,
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people that are kind of spun out and a little bit ungrounded. They can be really imaginative. They can start all kinds of stuff, but they usually don't finish things. They're just like kind of like a kite barely being held by this string. And so these aren't, it's proper to understand that these aren't the people. They're the disposition of the body's ability to compensate for different energies, right? You can compensate for free radical oxidation, but maybe not compensate for the lack of free radical oxidation. We need a certain amount of free radical oxidation. So, people that are fiery, their body has a difficult time compensating for inflammation and for fiery, for having those kind of qualities of being on. People that are more earth water people, they're more off, and it means that their disposition is going to show that. And it's really just that they're having a hard time compensating for being off. They can't really turn on so easily, and then people that what we call are more dominated by the wind, they have a hard time compensating for stress. They're very, very, very sensitive. Stress pushes them very easily. So there's different ways we can eat that will support those natures. Yeah. And those natures are also highlighted or aggravated in different periods of our life. When we might be a fiery person, but when we're like in the first 10, 15 years of our life, we have more earth water. We don't, so our fire is going to not really show so much. As soon as we hit about 16 or 17, and then all the way to maybe 60 years old, if we're a fiery person, we're going to be pushing hard. And that may start to disappear in our 40s as we may have exhausted our system so much. We may have burnt out our kidneys, burnt out our heart, and now we're suffering from that. So we can prevent a lot of those predictable illnesses that will come from those different dispositions. What were you
I
gonna
love
ask?
your insight. It's amazing, Douglas. And, when you take a look at a regular doctor, call it that, they don't dig deep into your lifestyle and everything else that is supporting you or not supporting you. You come with a problem, they give you a pill, and you're on your way typically. Um, on pharmaceuticals, you had mentioned that there are side effects, obviously. When
Mhm.
somebody goes down the road of traditional medicine, are there way less side effects, or can you also expect certain side effects when you're doing a more holistic traditional route?
Well, yeah, side effects are expected, but they're considered to be mistakes on the practitioner's part. Okay. So
Is-
for instance, if you're really a hot driven on person and we go to try to balance that out. Okay, there's different ways we can balance that out through creating more heaviness in your diet and lifestyle. And we can also do that through creating more coolness, cooling you down more. Okay. So if we cool you down too much, what might happen is now instead of having a hot disorder, now you have a cold disorder. That's a mistake of the practitioner. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or if we or the other option is that you could end up with you have a hot disorder and a cold disorder. Yeah. Or so yeah, so you could fix the disease and give another disease, or you could not fix the disease and give another disease and create complications. You could, like, if you are the same for cold. If you're trying to like fix a cold disorder, say a person has like hard growing tumors, they have an anaerobic chemistry in their system. They're cold, they can't really get up and do much, they're not really motivated, and you start to heat them up, you start to give them stuff to balance that disorder out.
Hmm.
So now you can end up with different things. You could cure the disorder, which is the ideal, but you could also end up with, now the person has a mix of hot and cold. Now they have both a hot disorder and a cold disorder because of the way you're pushing the body. And this is I mention this because this is the way most people do it. They don't look at what the body's systemically trying to do in order to fix itself, and instead they just give it either pharmaceuticals or supplements or even herbs to push the system to do what they want it to do, to make it do what it wants to do. And when you bypass that, then you can end up with more problems and more complicated problems, right? You could maybe cure the cold disorder completely, but now a person has a hot disorder.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so there is side effects that are possible, and the body does change. It changes with the season, it changes with the age. What worked when you were 10 years old is probably not going to work when you're 30 years old, and what worked when you're 30 years old is probably not going to work when you're like 70 years old. And so it changes with also like your lifestyle. You may be like, for instance, you may have had a job where you were going out and being very physical all the time. Now you're not working anymore, you're retired, you can't eat the same and do the same. So it requires a higher level of awareness and sensitivity to what's really happening right now in your life. You maybe like everything's the same, but your mother just died, and now you're depressed, or your child just died, right? Or your spouse just died, and now you're depressed. You can't do the same thing that you were doing before. you need to compensate for that because the way you're feeling, and now how it's affecting your life. I was talking, I guess it's maybe it was, is it Mental Health Month? Have you heard anything about that?
I'm not sure
I heard,
if it is, but I can say this with all certainty: there's a mental health crisis going on right now, and that
yeah.
in the last 2 weeks, the CDC came out with that, and said the most affected are teenage girls
Hmm.
in terms of mental
Yeah,
health crisis. It's
yeah.
huge right now. Yeah, overall for everybody,
Yeah. So
as a country.
I was talking or I was looking at an old video interview that I did of a doctor who uh, specializes in mental health, and he's an Ayurvedic doctor from
Mhm.
India. And he said some really interesting things. I tried to actually post it on Facebook, but maybe it's too big. Or maybe they're keeping it from going up. But one of the things he was talking about is that in Ayurveda, it's the term he used is it's much more connected to human life. It's much more connected to the reality of what it's like to be a human, you know. Instead of trying to like make you into something perfect, that you can frame up and hang on the wall and say, now you're perfect. It really moves with what's going on in your life, how you are, what your disposition is, what your capacity is, what your strength is. The expectations, there's not a lot of expectations laid on you. And there's an encouragement for you to be involved in your health, to be involved in your health, in your relationships.
Mm.
um, they look at, for instance, they look at trauma as in like you'd have a bodily injury, you know, and that it's not just post-traumatic stress. He said they look at post-traumatic stress as like one incident happens and it affects you, and then you deal with how that affected you. But trauma as something that happened many times to you and created like this wound or accident, like an injury in your system, and it takes a long time, and he talked about how you first have to gain trust. Some people are like, oh, okay, just do yoga and breathing exercises and this will help your thing. And the thing is that you're not going to get, you first have to get a person on board kind of with the idea of what's going on with them, and it takes them to they have to forgive what happened. They have to let go of what happened, and they have to understand themselves and move forward. And once they do some of those things, then yoga and breathing exercises and all that stuff. So it's one of the issues we have with traditional medicine, because it's available. It used to be called folk medicine, a lot
Mm.
of this stuff, and a lot of the folk medicine was passed on with the women, and a lot of the traditional medicine organized systems were passed on with the men. So the women would be like cooking the food, they'd be taking care of the babies, the men might be dealing with, you know, more serious illness that requires more attention and requires, like with adults, and how it works with their families and their work. And so there are these two different kinds of natural medicine systems. And with the delivery of a therapy or an herb in the folk medicine would be a huge body of wisdom and knowledge that the women, that the mothers would have, that they learned from their grandmothers. Certain reasons why you might not use more than a certain amount of this particular herb that might not be obvious. You can't just say, oh, this herb is good for your liver, here, take this. And that's what's happened with traditional medicine, and that's been a justifiable reason for governments to like want you to get a prescription, to go get peppermint tea. They want you to have a prescription for that. And it's like, a lot of people think, well, that's absolutely ridiculous, this is natural, but there's reasons behind it. And supporting traditional medicine education is really, really important, because these are all things we can go outside and pick. You can pick stuff right off of a bush and use it as medicine. But if you're not doing other things that support it and you're not using it with a certain level of wisdom, you can hurt yourself. You can put yourself out of balance. A lot, like I knew a person, he was really well known for his herbal knowledge. I went on an herbal walk with him in Costa Rica. We descended from like this really high mountain all the way through the jungle close to the beach. And several days, we spent in the forest. And we cooked up something that was very similar to what he thought it was, but it wasn't what he thought it was. And we all got really sick, you know. And he was very experimenting too, he would taste things, and he had a huge amount of knowledge, but he ended up with a brain tumor and died at a young age. And it's not unlikely that it's from eating poisonous stuff.
Wow.
It's not like he was involved in any kind of chemical exposure, or that he was eating bad. He was like a health nut, knew a bunch about plants. So it's like, even for people who know a lot, we still are like, if you're not 100% sure what that is, you probably shouldn't just pick it and make a tea and eat it. And in the same way, all the different things we choose to do, like a lot of people are like, oh, you have a tummy ache, just make some ginger tea, without really considering, are you hot? Do you have a hot disorder? Or do you have a cold disorder? The
Well,
stomach is,
this
yeah, go ahead.
seeing this, Douglas, and we're just about out of time, but what's coming clear here is traditional medicine is fantastic, great alternative, but you need a practitioner like yourself to guide you along the way. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to take some herbs, I'm going to be healthy now. There's a whole process involved in it. And you brought back such memories when you said folk medicine. I just had, visuals, back in the day, my grandmother had some remedies. We talked about
Yeah.
those things in family. Nowadays, not at all. What do you have? Let's go to the internet, or let's just make an appointment for the doctor and show up and have them throw you some stuff. Fascinating stuff today. I know we've talked about.
I had a neighbor, just to recap on what you said just a second. I had a neighbor, I was in Costa Rica for a little bit, and I had a neighbor, and I asked him if he knew any herbs, any medicines. And he's like, no, I don't. It's like, yeah, I don't know any medicines. As I got to know him a little bit better, I was like, yeah, like, what do you guys use? I noticed he had some mint growing or something. He goes, yeah. He ended up walking me around and pointing out like 21 weeds that they used for medicine. But in his mind, he didn't really know anything. That's just like common knowledge. That's, you use
Passed down. It
yeah.
was probably passed down from his heritage, and that's like everybody knows that, don't they? No,
yeah.
We have no idea.
My great grandmother used one remedy she used was boiled celery.
Wow.
Boiled celery. Celery is actually known now to have all kinds of amazing components for cancer and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of wisdom of why you use it. It's a fine line from losing the access to natural medicine, between that and like hurting ourselves, because if we organize it and demand too much from it, then it becomes kind of exclusive again, right? And traditionally, the medical doctor wasn't seen as like a higher level of society. Now we have like doctors, lawyers, architects, or whatever, like these higher, whatever, politicians. But traditionally they went out of their way to make sure that doctors were just like everyday people, so that they were more approachable, and so that people could really learn. And they didn't really need to know that much if they stayed within the guidelines of their culture. There's a reason that the cultures use spices. All these old cultures, they use a lot of spices. The food tastes incredible. There's a reason for that. It's to keep them healthy. And each culture had a little bit of like tendency to have a certain disorder because of what they preferred. Chinese people, they like more salty stuff. Indian people, they like more sweet stuff. And the diseases they get are kind of related to those preferences and their emphasis of certain medicine. too for the lifestyles. So
Got to tell you,
yeah.
we've talked, a number of times, but today, crystal clear in terms of traditional medicine and the comparison to modern medicine and our history of not only just our health, but everything else along with it. One word just resonates in my mind: balance. You need the right kind of balance with everything, no matter what it's going to be, whether it's traditional, modern. There's got to be a balance with your life, mentally, even purpose. Your website, indigenousmedicine.net, correct?
That's correct.
Yep. And you have, I think it's if I saw it correctly on another link, call it some health hacks that you have available. Is that?
Yeah, there's some health hacks. If you sign up for that, I'll send some other booklets, some of the stuff I cover a little bit more in depth. And I have an online event happening the 17th to the 19th of March.
Gotcha. All right. Details on that is on your website?
If you go to naturalbornhealer.online, but yeah, there's a link from my website, indigenousmedicine.net, to there.
Excellent. Douglas, great talking with you today. Such amazing insight into something that can help all of us. Just got to make that decision. And then I know you have a free consultation, so we can learn more if it's a right fit.
If anyone wants to call, a 15-minute free consultation for sure to anybody.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Too.
Take care.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.